Hi, I'm Randy Wooden, and welcome to another in our Edge Library series. This time talking to military folks and dealing with the question of what kind of money are you looking for? It's a tough question. Let's talk about it. First of all, it depends when they ask as to how serious a candidate you might be. For example, if very early on in the conversation they ask, well, what are you looking for money-wise? In my view, that's a screen-out device. It's a way for them to kind of dispense with you if you're too expensive, without investing the time to get to know you much more. On the other hand, if it happens toward the end of the interview, take heart, because that means probably that they're interested in you. If they weren't, they wouldn't ask. So, take that as a compliment. Now, I'd like to use an analogy here for a moment. Think about a stoplight. You pull up in traffic, you see a green light, you keep going. You see a yellow light, you probably slow down a little bit, or at least you're more aware of your surroundings. You might look to the side a little bit and sort of slow down and deal with things. If it's red, then, well, hopefully you stop and deal with it, and you don't move forward until the red goes away. So I like to use that analogy when structuring my answers for this question of what are you looking for? Let me explain. When it first comes up, and they ask, what are you looking for? I want to dodge the question. We talk about cushions in workshops and in other library series, so you might want to read up on and listen up on what a cushion is. But what you'll want to do is deflect this question and then change the subject. Example, they say to you, what are you looking for? You say, well, certainly look to be paid based on the scope of the duties and based on my skills and experience. I'm sure we'll be able to work something out, and then ask a question, maybe something that was mentioned a few moments ago you might want to clarify, get a little bit more information, or maybe just turn around and ask them something entirely new. The key here is to address the question briefly without giving specifics, and then turn around and change the subject. Next step, yellow light, is to stop and deal with it a little bit more. So they say, what are you looking for? The key here is dodge the question, but instead of changing the subject, what you'll want to do is turn around and ask them, what do they have in mind? And many times you'll actually get an answer, surprisingly enough. And that's a good thing for you, because you don't want to be the one to speak first when it comes to money. So they might ask you, again, we're at the yellow light phase, what are you looking for? Your response, pretty much the same as green light so far, which is certainly look to be paid based on the scope of the duties, based on my experience. It sounds like a great position. I'm curious, what sort of range did you have in mind? Or what sort of numbers were you targeting? And then be quiet and let them talk. You never know what they'll tell you. They may offer up a range. If they do, just nod your head and agree with them. Now let's say that doesn't work. Or let's say you do the green light and then you start getting kind of sweaty palms and you think, you know what, I don't really want to blow this interview. I really don't want to come across as evasive. Fine. I'm just trying to give you some tools to handle yourself if you feel that that's appropriate in your particular situation. So the red light comes up. You got to stop and deal with it. What are you looking for? Well, what you want to do is you want to mention that you understand what they're looking for in a position or in a candidate, that you feel like you're a good fit, you're excited about the opportunity, you feel a little bit awkward in telling someone what they ought to pay, but based on your research, based on your understanding of the position and looking at your skills, I'd envision this paying somewhere in the blank to blank range, followed by a question. The question is, how does that fit in with what you were thinking or with what your company was targeting? Now, let's go back to this range that you give them. First of all, the worst thing you can do, and a big mistake too many people make, is to name a specific number, $52,000. That's a mistake because it's a line in the sand, it's a hard number, and it's tough to move off that one way or the other. Somewhat of an ultimatum, essentially. The next worst thing you can do is to name a range which is framed by hard numbers. For example, 52 to 58. The employer only heard 52 when you really think about it. They don't care about 58. So if, and I say if, you get an offer, don't be surprised if magically the offer is 52, maybe 53, maybe 54, but not much beyond that. So instead, I always try to coach people, if you're going to have to show them your cards, what you want to do is to say a range and use phrases like mid, low, high, upper, or even in the, let's say, in the 50s, or mid 40s to mid 50s, high 40s to mid 50s. The key here is whatever you think this job is very likely to pay, and that's a very subjective thought, but you hopefully have researched the opportunity a little bit. What you want to do is to think, okay, if the job is going to pay roughly X amount of dollars, then the range I provide this fellow needs to have the bottom of it at or slightly above where I think this job is going to come in. So if you think the job's a mid-40s job, as an example, let's just say, then what you'd say is mid to high, perhaps low 50s. So I'd envision it paying in the mid to perhaps high, maybe even low 50s. How does that fit in with what you were thinking? The key here is you've created a little of what I'd call wiggle room for yourself by not naming a specific number, and that's important as negotiations go on. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment in the Edge Library series, talking to folks going through transition from the military to civilian life and dealing with the difficult question of, hey, what are you looking for? That's a tough question, and you will face it throughout your career, so you better be prepared to handle it. That's going to wrap it up for this segment. I'm Randy Wooden, and thanks for watching.